Hello and welcome to the Gooner Talk, back again with you guys for the Canton and Symeou show, our weekly show, although we did take a bit of a hiatus last week. Busy schedules between the two of us got in the way of that, so apologies. But we are back on the Gooner Talk this time around to have a discussion about our beloved club that threatens our souls every single week. Harry, how you doing, mate? Are you well?
Yeah, all good, mate. All good. Just trying to kind of keep calm, I guess is the message. How about you?
I don't know about keeping calm. I'm not a really angry person anyway, so I don't imagine seeing myself losing my
You're not
rag on
angry and you're an
Symeou show.
Arsenal fan. How's that work?
No, it's years of practice is what it is. It's years of just just sorting yourself out. Are you an angry person being an Arsenal fan? Would you describe yourself that way?
I can be an angry person. I've been an angry person at times, yeah. But
Yeah.
like you, in my old age, I think I'm calming down a little bit.
Yeah, old age. Unbelievable. It's only a few years between us. Unbelievable. Mikel Arteta, Harry, that is the kind of the main viewpoint of discussion around Arsenal. Since we last spoke, I think the last time we spoke, we were 1 point off fourth, which kind of does show how things have changed in that amount of time. And all of a sudden, we're now in a position where Mikel Arteta is dominating the discussion for very different reasons. Let me just kind of get where you're at with the coach right now.
So, I mean, like you said, just a few weeks ago, everybody was pretty pleased. Everybody was pretty content with where we were, the direction of travel, the fact that a lot of the new signings have come in this season and been quite positive, especially from a defensive standpoint. And then we've gone on this run of games where we've lost 3 of our last 4 in the Premier League, 2 of which were at Anfield and at Old Trafford. I said at the time, I think it was last time we spoke, I felt like Liverpool was a free hit. So my reaction to that wasn't overly excessive. The game at Old Trafford was not a free hit. Let me be clear about that. It wasn't a free hit, but it was a game you could quite easily lose away at Manchester United. It's not an easy game, and it's a place that traditionally we've struggled at. So when you think about the way that game unfolded, it was more frustrating than anything else, because I felt like, having found that equaliser to make it 2-2, we then gifted United the game with a moment of madness from Martin Odegaard. So again, my reaction, I think, was quite measured off the back of that. And then we went to Everton and all hell broke loose. The performance was for thinking of a better term, awful. It was really poor. There was questionable decisions made by the manager in the build-up and in the game that have got a lot of people kind of feeling confused, feeling a little bit unclear about what it is that Mikel Arteta is wanting from this team. And I completely understand that. But what I would say is, from my own personal standpoint, my hopes for Arsenal, or the goal that I personally set for Arsenal, has not changed. It hasn't changed since the start of the season. It hasn't got, it hasn't increased, or I don't feel like we're worthy of any more because we went on that unbeaten run. And equally, because we've lost a couple of games, I don't feel like we should be knee-jerking and completely changing our outlook on this team. This is a team that are not good enough to be consistent over the course of an entire season, with a manager who's probably not good enough to be consistent over an entire season. But if you as a football club make a decision to hire somebody like Mikel Arteta and label it, brand it, view it as a long-term project, then you cannot sack the guy before Christmas in his second full season. Now, as fans, we might think he's not the right man and he should be moved on. But let me make this clear. Arsenal Football Club are not pulling the trigger on Mikel Arteta today, tomorrow, the day after, the next week, next month. I don't think anyway. No. I think he'll still be at the club. So for me, when you're in this position where you're a point off the top 6, which is what I thought that Arsenal needed to achieve this season, I think it's harsh to say that he needs to be sacked. Where all this frustration comes from, in my opinion, is that a lot of what we saw against Everton was things that we thought we'd gotten past, problems that we thought maybe we'd gone some way to solving.
What are those problems? What do you think are the problems? Because this is where we get into kind of, I think, where we're going to start to kind of deviate in where our views align. Because I've seen a lot of issues over the 10 games that we went unbeaten. Was great, and I say it was great. It was good, but there was a lot of issues in those 10 games, and I think the position in the table, and certainly where, from my perspective, is that I was very critical of people that were still banging on the Arteta out kind of drum during that 10-game unbeaten run. And there's a lot of people who feel very justified right now after that Everton and Manchester United game, which I don't necessarily agree with, but the point is where I went from going from thinking that a managerial change after Villarreal would be the right move and what any other big club would do, going to the new season, turning over a clean slate. And obviously the start to the season was awful. We made some good signings. We arrested that slide. We went on a 10-game unbeaten run. But within those games and within this entire season, I've been yet to see a philosophy, yet to see a style, yet to see a consistent kind of run of performances where we've dominated games with a real, like, the Aston Villa games, the only one really I pick out as a game where we really gunned for the opponent. Even the Spurs game, we scored, we sat back and then hit them on the counter and got them twice and to go 3-0 up. And then they scored in the second half and we could have easily blown that game as well. So the Norwich game, the Burnley game, the Watford game, the Newcastle game, we haven't created enough chances in those fixtures despite winning them. And I think that now, after those two tests against United and Everton, which I think the last show we did on your channel, we said that these next upcoming games are going to tell us where we are as a team. And that Man United game and that Everton game really did highlight that what we were doing across that 10-game unbeaten run wasn't sustainable if we wanted to achieve our goal or above our goals this season.
Yeah, but that ties into the point that I was making, that 10-game unbeaten run, for me anyway, didn't say to me, oh my God, Arsenal are in a place now where we are a nailed on top 4 contender. So it depends, I guess, on how much you read into that run. If you believe that run was a significant sign of progress, then understandably, you're going to be overly disappointed when we go to Manchester United and Everton, and especially at Everton, play the way we did and end up getting beat. I just think, for me, the issues, going back to the question, what are the issues that I see that keep cropping up? The predictability in our attacking play was back again. And a massive part of that was Xhaka and Tierney being in the side. And Arsenal naturally, it was literally Xhaka gets the ball in that deep, slightly left of centre position, looks for Kieran Tierney, looks to pick him out. And, we put a cross into the box. Now, ultimately, that's where our goal came from, right? Kieran Tierney down the left-hand side, cutting the ball back. What we did better in that particular instance was get Martin Odegaard into the box quicker and use Gabriel Martinelli to kind of, make the run across the near post and take defenders away. But it's the predictability, it's the lapses in concentration, it's not being clinical enough when we really need to be. And that is partly down to us creating so little that when we do create something, we almost have to take it every time, because that's the difference between us winning or losing games. But the other side of it is that a lot of this is that we're talking about is such fine margins, Tom. And, we didn't go to Everton and get beaten by 4-0. It was a dreadful game where both teams were dreadful. And, in the end, Arsenal missed some really good opportunities, particularly at the end. Eddie Nketiah, Aubameyang didn't take them. Everton took a couple, and that's the way it went. I just think, for me, that when you look at Mikel Arteta and where we're at now, I think it would have been naive to feel like we'd gotten past all of this. It's going to crop up. The difference, or the key now for me, is that last season we went on that dreadful run, didn't we? I think September, October.
Yeah, we won in 10.
Yeah, we hadn't won in 10, which is awful. You can't allow a rot to set in. And that was what happened last season. There was a rot. We eventually got out of it, but it was too late. We were really good in the second half of the season, results-wise, in comparison to the rest of the Premier League, but we'd fallen too far behind. And I truly believe that the difference between Arsenal making Europe and not making Europe this season is if we can make sure that periods like that are just dips and not rots. If you let them turn into rots, then they become increasingly more difficult to get out of. So looking at the upcoming fixtures, there's some very winnable games there. And if you win 3 out of the next 4, for argument's sake, all of a sudden the outlook is very different again. So he ain't getting sacked. He's not getting sacked now. So let's give the team and him an opportunity to hopefully turn it around. But that doesn't mean there aren't any concerns and aren't any worries.
I think it's, and we're going to continue the discussion. I do want to jump into the chat box as well. And first of all, say thank you everyone for tuning in. As always, make sure that you're following Harry at Harry Symeou, and of course the Chronicles of a Gooner, where next week, should our schedules align once again, we will of course be returning for the next Canton Symeou show on Harry's channel. We alternate every single week, and of course, make sure you're subscribed to both. And thank you for the kind words you're throwing into the chat box. Been reading through a couple of those while Harry's been speaking, and they're being very kind about us, Harry, which is we always appreciate that. So
I've had a jumper comment as well.
I've from Owen of all people, I think.
Do you know what? I've worn this jumper a couple of times on my show, and I always get grief about it. So it's like it's become a thing now. So I'm actually quite pleased when the jumper gets brought up. It's warm and it's comfortable.
I've got this, like, it's a navy blue t-shirt, but it's got white lines that go vertically down it. But on the stream, because the camera darkens you, it looks like it's black and white. So the amount of Newcastle fan comments I get when I wear this shirt, and I don't think I've worn it in a lot. Or to be fair, the other day, as I was describing to you, the shacket that I wore previously.
Love a shacket.
Yeah, I've got a new one, and now I got described as if I'm on the Peaky Blinders this time around. So you can't escape criticism in the fashion world on YouTube. That's what we've learned. Yes, Jonathan should have worn the hat, because apparently the hat makes the ensemble is what it is. Let's return to the conversation. Look, Harry, I get kind of where you're at on the. We don't allow a rot to set in. We don't allow these results, and we've had a couple of bad ones. The issue for me on my side of things is that, like, I feel like the Man United and the Everton games were coming. I feel like what we saw in that 10-game unbeaten run, where there were plenty of positives, mainly from the results and from the match wins and from the avoiding a loss and the clean sheets. And the problem is during that 10-game unbeaten run, I didn't see enough evidence that this Arsenal side, not for a top four challenge, but even could sustain, say, a position in the top six. Because this season we were, at the start of the year, very fortunate that Spurs were dreadful. Man United were dreadful. Everton have continued to be dreadful. Aston Villa are a team that we were expecting to kind of be up there with the signings they were making, and their ambitions were dreadful. I mean, Man United have sacked their manager, Spurs sacked their manager, Villa have sacked their manager. We played all those clubs, beating two of those prior to them sacking their manager. It was only when we played Man United after they sacked their manager that we lost to them. That I look at the games that we were winning. We should beat Burnley, and we struggled to get that win. We should beat Norwich, and despite creating 30 shooting opportunities, came out 1-0 winners and could have dropped points if Pukki's shot hadn't been blocked in the last minute by Gabriel. The Watford game, we tried to lose that. We desperately tried to lose that game. The Newcastle match, Newcastle are a terrible side right now. And obviously we managed to get some goals at crucial periods during the game. And the Martinelli finish it's a low XG chance that he takes very well. But I feel like I look at those games, and at the time we're sitting, in and around the top four race, and you can't really point the finger anywhere at that point. You've got to kind of ride that wave. You've got to appreciate the fact that where we are on the table. But I did continually point out during that period that I was concerned that the way that we were playing wasn't sustainable. And I feel like the Everton game and the Man United game have shown that to be the case. And I now worry going into not only Southampton, who are a side that historically is a bit of a banana skin for us at home and away, and then we go and play West Ham, and that could drop us not just out of a top four race, which I don't think many people expected. I didn't at the start of the season. But out of a top six race as well, with how Spurs are rejuvenated, with how West Ham are, with how Manchester United are also rejuvenated too. Do you see that issue with the unsustainability of our kind of displays?
Yeah, I do. And, as I say, when you looked at those games and looked at those performances, there wasn't a massive amount to take encouragement from outside of the results. I completely agree with you. And so I understand why people are frustrated. I understand why there are people out there that want Mikel Arteta sacked. Now, I'm not, when I say that I wouldn't do it right now, it doesn't mean that I don't think there is a case for it to be done right now. But one of my big fears with Arsenal Football Club is that we're poorly run, and we are run by people who have shown incompetence over the years. And if you think back to when, Arsene Wenger was replaced, none of us were talking about Unai Emery. None of us were hoping for Unai Emery. It was an interview process that I don't think went the way that Arsenal wanted it to go. And Unai Emery got the job. And look, we gave him a chance. It didn't work. We sacked Unai Emery. We messed around for 3-4 weeks trying to sort out who was going to come in, put Freddie Ljungberg in place as an interim manager, which in my opinion impacted on us having the new manager bounce. You might as well leave Unai Emery there if you don't have a backup plan. But Arsenal pulled the trigger there without a plan. And then we went and got Mikel Arteta, which was another big risk. But part of me here is sitting here going, maybe Arteta isn't the answer, but who do you replace him with? And are we in a position to do that now? Because if we're not, then, it's weird. Like if we're not in a position to do it now, then, I just think, look, I explained my stance yesterday on my podcast, and because a lot of people were saying to me, well, you're criticizing Arsenal off the back of the Everton game, which I did. So where are you on what the club should be doing now? And my view is very much that Arsenal should be considering the idea of changing the manager. Doesn't mean that they should definitely do it, but there's got to be pressure there. There's got to be some form of pressure applied on Mikel Arteta to get things right and quicker. And if I were Arsenal, and I know this is a little bit snaky maybe and not ideal, but I'd be feeling out other options. I'd be having conversations. I'd be having my ear close to the ground to try and understand who may or may not be interested in the job, and being prepared for the eventuality that we do see another one of those rots, in which case you have to pull the plug. If we go on a bad run for the next 3-4 weeks, then sack him and change it. That's not a problem for me. But
so if we say we lose to Southampton, West Ham, Leeds, you lose those 3, you would change the coach.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the position becomes untenable then, partly because of what it means for this season and partly because of what we saw last season. The whole picture, you'd say that there's not been enough progress. But if Mikel Arteta goes and wins 4 out of the next 5, which is not impossible, then the outlook looks very different. And the point I'm trying to make is that the sample size needs to be bigger. We looked at last season, a lot of us were very frustrated, but a lot of us also accepted that it was his first full season in charge. And this is the time we're going to judge him this time around, this season. This Premier League will give you opportunities. People drop points all the time. It's not like if you don't win 75-80% of your games, you stand no chance. If you win 60% of your games, 50% of your games, and pick up a few draws along the way, you'll still be there or thereabouts. It's that competitive. And so for me, it's, if you want to do it, but make sure you've got a plan in place, because if you haven't, then it's pointless. And I fear that Arsenal probably don't have a plan in place. So to sack him tomorrow means you're going to be without a manager for a month, probably one of the most crucial months of the season. And find yourself in a spot of bother again. So yeah, that's where I'm at.
Yeah, I mean, if you think back to when we sacked Unai Emery, we were devoid of a real, of a coach for a while. Freddie Ljungberg came in, but hadn't managed at that level ever. And I think that if they are going to move him on, they need to have contingency sorted and ready to take over almost immediately and for the next game, which is really tough in this industry. We've seen Ole Gunnar Solskjaer left, and then Michael Carrick was in charge, didn't lose a game, and obviously played Arsenal and Chelsea during that time, and won at Villarreal against Unai Emery too. So if it is going to happen, they need to be prepared. I've just chucked with Harry's advice from the last show a poll into the chat box for the first time on the channel. So of all the polls to be our first poll, the question is, where are you on the manager? A, keep the faith. B, change the coach. Or C, I'm on the fence. If you are watching, please do jump into the YouTube live chat and cast your vote. We'll return at the end of the show to see where the votes are. Currently, after 49 votes in 3 minutes, 18% are keeping the faith, 48% are changing the coach, and 32% are on the fence. Let's see if that changes, which is interesting considering, and you've got to look at it from the perspective of my audience, coming from my perspective, have been quite pro Arteta, very quite heavily in the past. So it's very interesting how this community in particular is looking at 50% towards a change of coach. I also dropped in a question to the chat box. What's your position on the manager. The Robots Relate You says, in my opinion, Arteta in or out now isn't going to be a fix enough when the owners we have are terrible. Whoever they bring in to replace them will just be as meh, in the technical phrase of describing managers. Orlando says, I wouldn't do it now either. I would have done it in the summer after repeating 8th, which is where I was at in terms of the managerial position. Bulgarian Gooner says, keep for now. If we're stuck in mid-table mediocrity at the end of this month, then he deserves to be sacked. Steve Stone says, I'm on the fence, Tom. I've flip-flopped a couple of times this season already. Tejas says, I think we really need to keep within a win or two from the top 4 so that we can capitalise on not having European football towards the latter parts of the season. It's always that question as well, Harry, is if we do say, if that decision is made, say we lose against Southampton, lose against West Ham, and this position becomes untenable, and beyond everyone's surprise, they do end up moving him on. The question then is, who is out there that you get? People throw up names like Zidane and Ten Hag, and you're thinking, are they going to come to Arsenal? Is Arsenal enough of a draw for them? Because, you know, we joke around about the Vlahovic situation of him having no interest in moving. Do you think that would be, and is a growing case for Arsenal in this kind of 2021 era of the club and the attractiveness of the club?
Yeah, I mean, look, make no mistake about it, it's still a really attractive club. You know, it's a big club. It's a historically very successful club. It's a club with a massive global fan base. It's a club that participate in the best league in the world. And it's a club that's based in London. And a lot of people, I think, undervalue how important that is. If you're somebody that's planning to move to England from abroad, London is a big appeal. You know, maybe the rest of England is lovely too, but it's not as much of an appeal as London is to those who are looking at it from the outside in. So I think that the club is a very attractive proposition, but it's more than that. It's about, you need to sell the project to whoever this manager is that potentially comes in and replaces Mikel Arteta. You have to make them feel like there is an environment here in which they can succeed. And at this moment in time, I don't know how you sell that. You know, we've gone out and bought players in who I think have got bright futures ahead of them. But so kind of half of it's there, but you need to show that you're willing to then back them even further by going and bringing experienced and top players that can see you compete at the highest level. Look, as we always say, nobody's ever won anything with kids. You don't. It's as simple as that. And one of the reasons that Arsenal are largely inconsistent is because we're heavily reliant on a lot of kids. And when you've got people like Thomas Partey, who, I'm sorry, I know people are going to take offense to this, has been abysmal in recent weeks. It's been really under par, really poor, not just technically, but physically as well. He doesn't look up to it. That's a big problem, you know. And then you move further forward and you look at somebody like Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang, who's also been poor. And you look at Alexander Lacazette, who people were banging on about should be in the team. And, you know, all the hindsight merchants came out and moaned after the game against Everton, but half of them wanted Aubameyang dropped and wanted to see Lacazette start. So when those guys are not delivering and not performing, you know, they're the ones that the heat should be on as much as the manager. Them and the manager are the leaders of this team. They're the people that are going to be key in getting us to where we need to be. Saka, you know, Emile Smith-Rowe, these guys are great. They're fantastic, but they will have weeks where they don't score, where they don't contribute as you'd like them to. And we have to accept that. But the senior players, in my opinion, with all this, Tom, are getting a completely free ride. And it drives me mad. You know, it's the responsibility has got to be divided equally among the key stakeholders, the manager and the key players. And if you think that these kids are going to deliver on a weekly basis and get us to where we need to be, then recalibrate your expectations, because it's wrong. And so a lot of work still needs to be done at Arsenal. We've kind of done the first phase, building a new core, a young core, but we need to complement that with top players. And I hope that Arsenal do that in the near future. Is Mikel the man to take us to the next level? I don't know. But even if he does get sacked at some point in this season, similarly to the way Ole Gunnar Solskjaer went into United and almost helped restore the culture a little bit and help bring some of the young players through, not everything he did was bad. He ain't the guy to take them to the next level, but not everything he'd done up to that point where he got sacked was bad. And I think you'd probably look back at Mikel Arteta's reign in 2 or 3 years' time and say the same thing. There were some positives there. Just can't see them right now.
I think that the issue for some people is going to be with the senior players is, would say a new coach come in and get more from Partey, get more from Aubameyang? I kind of look at Aubameyang as an individual and on his own, and I say, if he was in a system where chances were being created more regularly and more often, he'd have more chances to score. And obviously, he's in an absolutely horrible state of form right now. But is that because the very few chances that he's getting, when he misses them, he's got a lot longer to fester on the kind of the negative disappointment of missing, because the next chance takes so long before it comes to him again? And is that having an impact on his performance? You can't say the same for Partey, because it's very different with Partey. Like playing in a midfield at Arsenal, he's got a lot of the ball. He has a lot of the ball. For me, I see a player who's not yet adapted from La Liga. He takes too much time on the ball, which you get a lot more time of in Spain. He takes too heavier touches. His quickness of thought isn't quite there yet. And for a 28-year-old to develop and to improve and to expect that quick change, it's, it might not come. And that's a real concern, because if it doesn't come after, say, 18 months and you've not yet adapted, despite missing 21 games through injury, he's played 45, 46 games now for Arsenal. He should know that he needs to speed up his game. He should know that he needs to be aware of the space. But from the striking situation, Harry, do you think there is an argument to suggest that maybe Aubameyang individually, yes, he's missing chances, but we aren't creating enough for him right now?
Yeah, I do think we're not creating enough for him. I mentioned earlier on that it feels like our games are being decided on the 1 or 2 chances that we do carve out playing this way. There's so much pressure on someone like Aubameyang or Nketiah the other night, for example, that when that ball comes to them, it's almost blurring their vision. It's almost weighing heavy on their shoulders and at times making it harder for them to score. I really do think that the pressure is definitely there, and it's more than it should be. But equally, I want my senior players, especially my captain, to take some responsibility.
He's not a captain, though, is he? Like, he's just not.
No, he's not. He's not. But this is.
So is that on Arteta then, to say, look, he's not a captain. We know that. I can see that. You can see that. The fans can see that. Is there not an element or an argument to say he should change the captaincy because he's not a leader?
There is, but what are the repercussions of that? Because I think it was very clear in the summer that although we needed a striker that was a better fit to the way we play, Arsenal looked at the situation, looked at the positions in which they wanted to strengthen, and saw the striking position as one that we do need to address eventually, but one that we could delay because we had Aubameyang and Lacazette, 2 players who have been pretty accomplished forwards in the past. The implications of saying to someone like Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang, who I'm sure the captaincy was a factor in, or holding on to the captaincy was a factor in giving him the new contract or getting him to agree the new contract as well. I think the implications of potentially snatching that away from him is as if to say, Aubameyang, you showed loyalty by staying here. We desperately wanted you to stay, but we're not sure about you anymore. And we're going to take that away from you. And your performances are not good enough, and you're not enough of a leader. I don't know how that would be received by a senior player. And I think that that's potentially opening up a can of worms that Mikel Arteta doesn't need to deal with. He's got enough shit to try and sort out.
Yeah.
So, I think when you come into a club and a very senior player, and let's be honest, up until last season, Arsenal's best player is the captain. As a new manager coming in, even a year in, you're still taking a huge gamble and huge risk, and risking an almost kind of meltdown by going, sorry, mate, you're not for me.
Yeah, I do see the argument. I suppose the counter to that would be, can things get much worse for Aubameyang right now? And would change in the captaincy, how much of an impact would that really have? And if we're considering bringing in a striker in the next 6 to 8 months, would changing the captaincy be all that bad if it has a more positive impact in the short term for whoever we replace him with? It's impossible to know the answer, of course, and it is all hypothetical, but it's one that maybe Arteta needs to consider. We're going to go to questions in the chat box for the last 20 or so minutes of the show. Harry, before we do that, did you have any other pressing matters you were desperate to cover before we go to questions?
Not really, other than like we just need to keep calm. You know, we just need to understand where this team is. We just need to understand that we do have a manager who is still learning, a manager who is still trying to work out his trade. And if you're angry about him making mistakes, and if you're angry about the fact that he's in the role, then direct it at the people upstairs. Bring the Cronky out protests back. Make some noise about that, and make some noise about the actual root cause of the problem. Because if me or Tom were offered the Arsenal job, we'd both take it. None of us are fit for it, but we'd both take it because it's a dream job. And if we got it, none of us would be letting it go for anything. We'd be giving our best for the club. And I truly believe that Arteta is giving his best for the club. If he's not good enough, it's on the people upstairs. And the whole negativity and toxicity and overreaction off the back of every single defeat. When I talk about not getting into a rot, that puts us into a rot. That deepens the hole that we're in. You know, it's not helpful. So I'm not saying be happy about where Arsenal are at. I'm not saying be happy about the performances we're seeing, but direct your anger and your frustration at the people that are the actual problem at this football club. Because I guarantee you, it doesn't matter who we bring in, 6 months, a year down the line, we're all going to be sitting here still saying that we haven't got good enough players. We haven't gone and spent 80, 100 million pounds on individual players. And we're still a million miles between the money men, Chelsea and City.
There you go. I mean, to round off kind of the discussion part of the show, nicely done. Let's jump into the chat box and go through some of your questions. We'll alternate these. Mitchell says, Canton Symeou sounds like a high-end solicitor firm. I don't know how successful it would be, but thanks, Mitchell. Dan Roberts says, Harry, when Aubameyang eventually goes, who would you give the armband to? I would say Gabriel or Ramsdale.
Yeah, I think they're two solid options. I like the idea of a centre-back being captain. The only reservation I have with Gabriel is we hear quite a bit about his English not being great. And I know that a lot of being a captain in 2021 is about leading by example, as opposed to shouting and screaming like in the Tony Adams days. But I just wonder if that would be a factor. It'd be great to see one of the homegrown boys do it, but I don't think either of them or any of them are particularly captain material. I think Gabriel's a good shout. Yeah, I know people have talked about Tierney in the past as well, but he's not fit enough. He's not fit often enough, and that's a big problem for me. So yeah, I think I'd go Gabriel.
The Robots Will Eat You says, for myself, what is the first quick fix that should be done as soon as possible? Never mind the stuff behind the scenes. What should Arteta do immediately against Southampton? We've conceded 9 goals in our last 4 games. And I know that we talk a lot about kind of chance creation as a big issue, but we need to ground ourselves for a second. We need to have a bit of a reality check. And for me, it might mean changing system, because the system anyway has not been working. And I would be tempted to go to a 3 at the back against Southampton. I would be tempted to go Tierney Tavares on the left-hand side and Gabriel on White and Tomiyasu playing. And I thought Tomiyasu going forwards has improved game on game, actually, at Arsenal. I think he can operate in a wing-back role. We've still given you that balance, because what it means is if Tomiyasu is playing the wing-back, he can be disciplined and let Tierney kind of shift over and attack on the left-hand side and really overload that left flank. So maybe going to a 3-4-3 is something that we could look at, or a 3-5-2 with Ødegaard still operating in that 10. But I think we need to solidify things at the back, and we need to stop conceding, because that's the immediate issue that looks to be costing us the key points, is we're conceding silly goals. Let's go to Sam, who says, is Arteta, Harry, better suited to a technical director role, considering his off-field impact versus the on-field decision-making?
No, I think Mikel Arteta, I think what you get with new managers is you get people who quite often fall into making or fall into their own kind of philosophy based on the way they start their careers. So you might start with a really attacking philosophy in mind, see that you can't play that way, be a little bit more pragmatic based on the players you have at your disposal. And over the course of your career, you've seen that works, and you trust it, and you develop more of a belief in it, and therefore that becomes your philosophy. Whereas with Mikel Arteta, I think he's come in with a very clear philosophy, and that is sometimes the problem. The fact that he won't deviate away from that because he believes in it so strongly is actually his downfall at times, i.e. the patterns of football in which we attack with. they are so robotic and they are so pre-planned that they become predictable, but he will not venture away from that. And I think that he's a manager who I think is learning a lot, but obviously whether it's enough, quick enough for Arsenal is another thing. I just think that he is a great coach. It's clear that he has very, very strong ideas, but as a manager, he's probably lacking a little bit. And I'm not sure that giving him the manager role, although in terms of the day-to-day running of the team isn't all that different, I think we still should look at him as a head coach because he is a coach before he is a manager.
Diallo says, do you think bringing on Xhaka was a desperate move on the part of Arteta? It seems weird. Look, I thought it was surprising that he started the game. I thought it was even more shocking that he played the entire game as opposed to him starting. I mean, you look how unfit Tierney was. And I mean, Xhaka's coming off the back of not playing in a couple of months and off the back of a serious injury, and he looked leggy. And I think that we saw against Man United with the selection of El Neni and Partey that Arteta kind of wants to bring back some seniority to the midfield. I think he feels like maybe the midfield is losing us these games and we're losing those midfield battles. But the problem is, as I think he's not had kind of the front or the cojones, as Troy Deeney would say, to drop Partey. Because Partey's been the issue. Like for Lokonga's been our best centre midfielder this season, and for our two most important games against Man United and Everton, he wasn't featuring, and that was a huge mistake. So I didn't mind Xhaka coming into the team, but I would have dropped Thomas Partey and I would have played Lokonga alongside Xhaka if you were going to play Xhaka, because Lokonga has been brilliant, and I can't get my head around why he's not been playing him. Cookie Monster says, Harry, do you think Potter would do a better job with this Arsenal squad right now? Potter seems to be a very popular name being thrown around. Would you take him at Arsenal if he was to change managers?
Graham Potter's got a lot more to do before he's deserving of a job like Arsenal. I'm sorry, like
what did Arteta do?
Yeah, agreed, and
Yeah.
that was a big risk, you know, and it's a risk that probably is going to prove not to be a right one. But with Graham Potter, I think there's a lot of things with Graham Potter's sides that you could, you know, they started the season brilliantly, went on a bad run. You know, they draw a lot of games. They've drawn 8 games in the Premier League so far this season. That's more than anybody else. They've improved defensively, but they're struggling to score goals. And a lot of that is kind of similar to what we're seeing with Mikel Arteta's team. Very clear patterns of play that maybe are becoming a little bit predictable, and strikers that can't seem to finish. I don't know. Look, he's someone that I would keep a close eye on, but he's another project manager, Graham Potter. And people have already shown and indicated that they're not willing to wait for a project or back a project. So what's the difference between Graham Potter and Mikel Arteta, other than one's a bit more experienced? I think you're going to get the same sort of direction. Young players, specific style of football, not necessarily shopping in the big leagues and shopping in the bracket below. I don't think there's all that much. I'm not saying Graham Potter's not a better manager than Arteta.
What do you make of his style, though? Because, like, the XG for Brighton's insane. Like, they create so many chances but miss so many. Do you not think that Arsenal could benefit from the style that he's implementing at Brighton?
Yeah, they could benefit from it. You know, and I don't think he's a bad coach, but I think he's a coach that needs to be given autonomy, needs to be given control. And that's what we're trying to do with Mikel Arteta. So it comes down to, do you think that that Graham Potter is better than Mikel Arteta? Swap them, fine. But ultimately, you're still bringing in someone who wants to oversee a longer term project, as opposed to Antonio Conte, who comes in and gets you results quickly, maybe leaves a shit show behind him when he goes. But it just depends what people want, because when we talk about the project, the process, it's something that pisses people off. It's something that gets people's backs up. If you go and get Graham Potter, we're not going to win the Premier League in the next 3 years. So that's my point. It's, what are you willing to accept as an Arsenal fan? This squad, I believe, is poor. I honestly do think that.
Where do you think it ranks in the league?
6th, 7th. And
who are the teams better than our squad?
Man City, Chelsea, Liverpool, Man United. I think on paper, Leicester's squad is probably there as well. You know, they've made a couple of dodgy signings in defence this summer.
Who in their team starts ahead of our best 11?
Well, I think people like Tielemans come in. I think people like Ndidi are probably playing better than Thomas Partey. I think, I think I'm quite happy with our centre backs at the moment, but Johnny Evans is a decent centre back. You look further forward, Jamie Vardy seems to be more potent in front of goal than Aubameyang at the minute. James Maddison can create, can score goals. There's a lot of talented players there. But the point I'm making is that if we're having this discussion and we've already named 4 teams that definitely 100% have a better squad than us, why are we outraged that we're not 4th?
Yeah. I think we had the 5th best squad person. That's why I was asking the questions
West Ham
about the
as well.
Leicester.
You could,
West Ham have got a very good team. I think the West Ham had the 6th best team. I think Spurs have the 7th. And I think that's because they got a very, very disinterested Harry Kane at the moment. If it was a fit and firing Harry Kane that we've seen in the past, they probably would overtake us for the amount of goals that he brings them. But just because he's just absent for them, it drops them down a couple of places because of how important he is. But also in terms of a manager, where does the manager rank in terms of Premier League managers? It could arguably not even be the top 10. So that obviously would bring Arsenal down. I think that Arsenal, if we get top 6, look, that's the expectation. But we had the 5th best team. If we got top 4, in my view, it would have been an overachievement. It would have been a brilliant achievement to get top 4. If we get 5th, I'm very happy. If we get 6th, I would look at it and go, who is that team that's finishing 5th and why are they finishing above us? If we finish outside the top 6, there's no excuse for that. Like there's just no excuse.
If we don't finish in the top 6, Tom, he should be sacked.
Absolutely.
Let's be clear about that.
I think we both agree on that.
Yeah, that is where we need to be. And if we're not, you sack him. You don't even think about it twice.
Well, I mean, I was into to our pal judges the other day having a chat and saying that like he feels that, and he didn't call us out directly, but he did like specifically say like fans who think that the top 6 is like that's the expectation for them. That's not good enough. Like we should be aiming for top 4. Where have our standards gone? What do you kind of make of that line of thinking from our fella?
It's hard to process that Arsenal are where they are nowadays because of what we've seen over the last 20 years. But the reality is, if you talk to non-Arsenal fans, they don't have such an elevated opinion of Arsenal as we do, because half of it is because we want it to be true, and the other half is because we believe it's true, right? Arsenal, massive football club, very high standards over the years. And it's hard as somebody who cares and loves the club to process the fact that we're not one of the best 4 or 5 teams in the league anymore. But that's the reality. You can't sit there and tell me that we have a better side than any of the people, any of City, Chelsea, Liverpool, and United. Therefore, our ceiling is 5th. If your ceiling is 5th, which is your absolute maximum, and you finish 6th, you're only 1 place off of what your ceiling is. It ain't that bad. And I don't get why people struggle to process that. I think it's really easy to just go, oh, we're the Arsenal and this is how it should be. The landscape has changed dramatically over the years. When we were competing for league titles, we were going head to head with Manchester United. It was a 2-horse race every single season. You'd have backed Arsenal or Manchester United wherever they went in the country at that point to beat whoever they were facing, barring when they met each other. Thierry Henry called it the other day. He called the Arsenal-Man United fixture the title decider because we knew that the other one wasn't going to drop that many points throughout the rest of the season. Now you got Chelsea. Now you got City. You've had Leicester competing for the top 4 over the last few seasons. You've had Spurs become a top 4 contender, not in the last couple of years, but prior to that. The football landscape has changed. And with all the investment coming in from states, owning football clubs, the world is different. It's a different place. And people have to be able to understand that. And they don't. They look at the old days and go, well, Arsenal were top of the league. Arsenal were fighting with Man United. Where have our standards gone? You've got to be realistic. And if you're unrealistic, you'll just always be pissed off all the time.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we sit here at the start of December. And the issue for me is going to be, and I think we both agreed and said, if we lose the next 3 games, so if we lose against Southampton, there's a huge question that has to be asked anyway at home. You've got West Ham at home. That West Ham game is crucial, not only because obviously of the competition and where that sits us in terms of taking 3 points off them, gaining 3 points ourselves, but as we just discussed then, in kinds of rankings of where West Ham's squad is in comparison to us, the job that David Moyes has done. If West Ham finish fourth, it's an overachievement for them. And if they finish above us, Man United, it's an overachievement because I think our squad is better than West Ham's squad. I mean, look at them now. They've just lost Zuma. They've lost a few other players as well because of injury. If they still manage to get that top 4 position, it's an unbelievable win. And in that sense, you're asking Arsenal to overachieve above Man United and then outcompete an overachieving West Ham United at the same time. But that doesn't matter if Arsenal are sitting 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th in the table. It's so hard right now because we are in December and we are, say, a couple of wins away from being in a top 4 race again, or a couple of wins away from being out of a top 6 race. It's just such fine margins and so close. And obviously, people want wins right now, and football moves so quickly and the narrative changed so quickly that 2 weeks ago, to say Arteta out in a live chat and a YouTube comments, as I commented and said, is a little bit out of place to be saying Arteta out 1 point off top 4. 2 weeks or a week or so later, you've lost against United and Everton. And I think just by looking at our poll that I put up at the start of the show, 212 votes, it was going up every time, 226 votes now, 53% of those would move on from the manager. If you haven't voted already, by the way, guys, the poll is still in the chat box, and make sure you're dropping a like on the video. But do you know what I mean, Harry? Like, it's mad how how quickly things change.
Yeah, for sure. And that's the thing. Just as they can change for the worse very quickly, they can also change for the better if you just put a couple of results together. And that's the point. Like, everybody's very quick to kind of say somebody's failed before they've actually failed nowadays. Everybody's very quick to be, or to show animosity towards individuals that they know nothing about just based on football results. You got people kind of screaming from the rooftops that the manager should be sacked, yet 3 weeks ago they were, saying, oh, you know what, this is looking like it might be a pretty decent season. I just think that everything is so reactionary, and you cannot make informed and I think deep judgments based on such small sample sizes. You go and win the next 4 games, and all of a sudden you're looking at a very different thing. Now, are there faults? Yes, nobody said there weren't going to be. But if you thought after that run that we went on just before the Liverpool game, that Arsenal were never going to have a dip throughout the remainder of the season, we're not going to have more defeats, we're not going to hit more brick walls, then you got carried away. And that's the reality. And you've been slapped back down to earth now.
It's difficult for me, the small sample size thing, because obviously we've sat here and we've had 2 back-to-back 8th place finishes. I know what you mean in terms of the small sample size. Like, we look over the last 2 games and that's how it's changed the narrative from what it was 2 games prior. But again, I think we go full circle in this debate to the 10 games we went unbeaten and how convincing those 10 games really were. It's for me, that's the tricky part, is because, and that's why I think the argument comes down to, Harry, whether we as individuals sit there and go, if someone says they would change the manager right now, I won't speak for you. From myself, I wouldn't criticize someone for having the opinion that they want to change the manager right now, because I think that they would have looked at what's happened over the last 2 years of Arteta, and they'd look at what we've done and where we are. Have we implemented a style? No. Have we improved the way we recruit players? Yes. Are the players progressing? Some of them, but not too many. I think you look at Saka, Smith Rowe have definitely progressed under Arteta. I think defensively we looked to have improved, but not consistently, as we've seen with 9 goals conceded in the last 4 games. But I don't think there's enough evidence for me to say that wanting him gone is not a grounded view about the coach right now. Well, I mean, I'll let you answer the question. If someone said to you, they are Arteta out, do you think they're exaggerative in that position, or is it a fair position to be in right now?
No, I think it's a fair position. It's absolutely a fair position. I think with arguments, you can spin a lot of stuff to go your way. You could say that the young players have developed, a lot of them. You could say, as you said, that the recruitment of players has got better. You could look at the defense and say that the defense overall has got better. I would put a lot of the goals we conceded in the last few weeks down to the midfield not doing their job more so than the actual back four itself.
Mm.
I think, I think you can always spin it either way. And I think both sides are valid. I just think that there is a way of doing it. There is a way of making your points that doesn't portray you as an idiot who's frothing at the mouth, waiting to have a go at someone. There's a way of being concerned about where this Arsenal team are at, and then turning up at the Emirates Stadium and putting that to one side and getting behind the team from the minute you arrive there till the minute you leave. All of those things can be done. Not every opinion has to be so extreme one way or the other. And I think that as a fan base, we've shown ourselves as unable to do that, unable to be fair, unable to be balanced. And that is fueled by, people online hiding behind anonymous accounts, and people jump on bandwagons. If you come and sit down and have a chat with me and present loads of good views, whether they're your views or you've taken them from somewhere else, if you can put those together and present them in a good way, I don't think anybody would say, oh, you're an idiot, that your opinion's completely wrong. I think they would.
Well, some might.
Yeah, some might. I actually like to hear different opinions. I think that helps me decide whether mine is right or not. And it helps me to build on mine, or think that maybe I'm overthinking it. Reflecting on your own view because of an opposite argument is really powerful. It's a good thing. But we don't seem to be, in general, as a fan base, mature enough to be able to do that with one another. It's people just wanting to have a go at each other. There were people, Tom, I guarantee it, on Monday night that were sitting there watching that second half, sharpening their knives, already thinking about what they were going to tweet at the full-time whistle to have a go at Arsenal. And equally, there are people who, when Arsenal were winning games, were sitting there waiting to tweet something to say,
they're just as bad.
Yeah,
just as bad as one another. Honestly, I can't stand it either way. It is. I hate using the word toxic, but there is rarely a better word to describe it. It's either toxic positivity or toxic negativity, and I'm very thankful that I look at both of us, and a lot of the people that watch both of our channels find themselves in the middle ground between those two spectrums. Because we were able, as you say, to take on information, reflect on your viewpoint, and change your view if it needs to change based upon being given better evidence. I think that what that middle ground is, though, is that we want the best for Arsenal, and that we want Arsenal to win the next game. That's where I want to kind of finish this show, Harry, because this is something that's dominated my chat boxes, and I don't know if it's come up in yours either. And I know it's something we've discussed in the past, but there are people I know that have been tweeting me and I've been putting into the chat box and in my comment sections, arguing the point when I say, if you want Arsenal to lose against Southampton because you think that'll go further towards getting Arteta sacked, in my view, you're no longer an Arsenal fan. That's my opinion. That's where I sit on that. Where do you kind of sit on this thing, that's this phenomenon that's grown amongst fandom these days?
Yeah, 100% agree. If you truly have the interests of the club at your heart, you will want the club to win every single football match they participate in. You need to be able to recognize that whoever is in charge of the club, whether you back them or not, is in charge. I mean, for example, if you don't like Boris Johnson, you don't stop supporting England in the World Cup, do you?
Such an on-brand. You have any parties this weekend, Harry?
Yeah, my address is number 10. No, but it's true, isn't it? Like, sometimes you can love something without always backing every single person that represents it. That's the way I see it. And I just think that people to be outraged, love to be upset, love to be pissed off. And if you're sitting there going, I've got a lot of friends and family members even who have Arsenal season tickets, and towards the end of the Wenger days, they were going, well, I ain't going until Wenger gets kicked out. Well, then you obviously don't care that much, do you? You're obviously not that bothered, and you're using it as an excuse that you don't like the manager to cover up the fact that actually you're not as committed as you want everyone to think. And that's how I see it with this as well. I don't think you can be an Arsenal fan if you want Arsenal to lose. If you've truly got the club's interests at heart, you want Mikel Arteta to turn this around. You want Arsenal to turn this around, and it's as simple as that.
Absolutely. Harry, thank you so much, mate, for coming on. As always, really appreciate your time. Tell people where they can find you and where the next show is going to be.
Yeah, the next show is going to be next week, the Canton and Symeou show. We'll let you know when it's going to be. We'll make sure that we get that penciled in. You can find me over at the Chronicles of a Gooner and at 90 Min. You can also find me on Twitter at Harry Symeou. And we're going to be doing a show live actually in about 10 minutes. We're going to be talking about how Mikel Arteta might be able to fix Arsenal's attack, which is going to be interesting. So come join.
Oh, very, very interesting. Make sure you check that out. Yeah, Chronicles of the Gooner, link to the channel will be in the description. So make sure that you go and give that a subscription and a watch. And make sure you're dropping a like on today's video as well. Let's just finish the show by having a look at that poll that we put up earlier on in the show. 285 votes later. 19% of people will keep the faith with the manager. 54% would want to change the coach, and 27% are still on the fence. Thank you so much, guys, for tuning in. As always, please do drop a like on the video and subscribe if you haven't done so. I'll be back tomorrow morning with the 8 a.m. show. There may be a preview show for the Southampton game this evening. Members, if you'd like to come on, just throw your interest into the Discord server. But other than that, it's been an absolute pleasure to speak to you as always. And as always, up the Arsenal.